Most people assume that when a conversation goes wrong, someone messed up. They were rude, or they didn't care, or they just weren't listening. But that's almost never what's actually happening. The real reason most conversations break down is simpler and way more fixable than that. People are speaking completely different languages and have no idea they're doing it. You've felt this. You've had a conversation where nothing you said seemed to land, where the other person looked at you like you were speaking in code. Or flipped, someone talked at you and you just wanted them to stop and you couldn't explain why. That friction isn't personality, it's a communication mismatch. Thomas Erikson wrote a book called Surrounded by Idiots, and in it he maps out a 4-color framework, red, yellow, green, blue, that explains why some conversations feel effortless and others feel like pushing a boulder uphill. By the end of this video, you'll know which color you are, you'll be able to spot other people's colors fast, and you'll know exactly what to do differently so conversations actually work. And if you skip this, you'll keep misreading people, they'll keep misreading you, and nobody will know why. Let's start with the 4 colors. And I don't mean a personality quiz result you forget in a week. I mean 4 types of people you already know. You just didn't have words for them yet. Reds are driven by results. They move fast, they make decisions quickly, and they genuinely don't want to hear about your feelings unless those feelings come with a solution attached. The red in your life is the person who interrupts your story to get to the point. They're not being mean, they're wired for outcome over process, and every extra sentence you add feels like wasted time to them. They'd rather be wrong fast than right slow. Yellows are the loudest person in the room, and somehow you love them for it. They walk in with 3 ideas before they've taken their coat off. They're energetic, funny, magnetic, and they will absolutely call a DJ for a party nobody has agreed to throw yet. The yellow superpower is enthusiasm. Their blind spot is follow-through. They light things up and then bounce to the next thing, leaving the details for someone else to figure out. Greens are the most reliable people you'll ever meet, and they will never once tell you when something's bothering them. They crave stability the way other people crave excitement. They're warm, patient, and deeply loyal, but ask them to make a fast decision under pressure and they go quiet. Not because they don't have thoughts, but because they'd rather absorb discomfort than create conflict. The green is the person who says, "I'm fine," and means the exact opposite. Blues are the ones who read the entire instruction manual before touching the product, and then had follow-up questions about the manual. They notice the detail you missed. They want proof before they trust you, data before they decide, and a clear process before they move. They're not being difficult when they push back on your idea. They're applying their actual operating system, which runs on logic and evidence, not optimism and vibes. Now, picture these 4 people planning a dinner party together. The red takes over immediately, picks a date, sets a time, assigns tasks, and doesn't ask if Saturday works for you. The yellow has already texted a DJ and is floating the idea of a dessert bar, a photo booth, and a themed dress code, none of which is confirmed or funded. The green quietly makes sure there's enough food, enough drinks, that everyone feels welcome, and then retreats to the kitchen where there's no small talk and no spotlight. The blue made a spreadsheet. The blue is stressed about the spreadsheet. The blue has questions about the guest list that nobody wants to answer right now. That's the 4 colors in action. And here's what's worth noting. No one in that room thinks they're the difficult one. Everyone thinks they're operating normally, because for them, they are. Knowing your color is step 1, but there's a trap most people fall into the moment they think they've got this figured out, and it's the thing that makes this framework actually backfire.
What's your color? The 3-question test. Before you can speak anyone else's language, you need to know which one you default to. So here's a quick 3-question test that narrows it down fast. Question 1. Are you more introverted or extroverted? Not which one you wish you were, which one actually describes how you recharge. Extroverts get energy from other people. Introverts get drained by too much of it and need quiet to come back to themselves. If you're extroverted, you're either a red or a yellow. If you're introverted, you're either a blue or a green. Question 2. Are you more logical or emotional in how you make decisions? When something goes wrong, do you immediately want to fix it, or do you first need to process how it feels? Logic first lands you in red or blue territory. Emotional first puts you in yellow or green. Put those two questions together and you've got your answer. Extrovert plus emotional equals yellow. Extrovert plus logical equals red. Introvert plus logical equals blue. Introvert plus emotional equals green. If you're still not sure, there's a third question. Do you move fast or deliberate? Reds and yellows tend to speak quickly, decide quickly, act quickly. Blues and greens take their time, not because they're slow, but because they want to be sure before they commit. That third question is usually the tiebreaker. Now, one thing worth knowing before you lock in your answer: almost nobody is a pure single color. About 80% of people are a blend of two. You might be a red-yellow who moves fast and loves people, or a blue-green who is detail-oriented and deeply conflict-avoidant. That's completely normal. What matters isn't finding the one color that defines you, it's identifying your default, the style you fall back on when you're not thinking about it, when you're rushed, stressed, or just running on autopilot. Because that default is what gets you into trouble. Think about the last conversation that went sideways. Not a huge fight, just a moment where things felt off, where the other person seemed irritated or checked out and you weren't sure why. Chances are your default color was running the show, and the other person's color was quietly speaking a different language. Neither of you noticed, neither of you adjusted. That's the pattern. And now that you know which color you tend to default to, here's the problem: nobody actually talks about. The core mistake almost everyone makes isn't being a bad communicator, it's assuming everyone else communicates the same way you do. When your color matches the person you're talking to, conversation feels almost effortless. Two reds in a meeting, fast, direct, decisions made, done. Two yellows catching up, loud, chaotic, fun, everyone's talking over everyone, and somehow it works. But the moment you're speaking your color to someone who runs on a completely different one, things start to quietly fall apart, and usually neither person can explain exactly why. Take a red giving feedback to a blue. The red skips the setup, gets straight to the verdict. This report's not right, here's what needs to change. To the red, that's respectful. They're not wasting anyone's time. To the blue, it lands like a gut punch. The blue spent days on that report. They checked every figure. Without context, without the reasoning behind the feedback, they don't know what went wrong or how to fix it. So they shut down. They go quiet. The red reads the silence as defensiveness and gets more blunt. The blue reads the bluntness as an attack. Nobody wins, and both people walk away thinking the other one is the problem. Or think about a yellow pitching an idea to a green. The yellow is electric about it, jumping between possibilities, talking about potential, painting a picture of how great it could be. The green is listening, nodding, but internally they're getting more and more uneasy. Too many moving parts, no clear plan. What exactly are we committing to here? The yellow takes the nodding as enthusiasm and keeps going. The green doesn't say anything because they don't want to kill the energy. The meeting ends, nothing gets decided, and the yellow is confused about why the green seems reluctant later. Or flip it, a blue walking a yellow through a detailed plan, slide by slide, data point by data point, precise, thorough, technically airtight. By minute 4, the yellow has mentally left the room. Not because they don't care, but because their brain runs on energy and momentum, and this isn't feeding either. The blue registers the glazed expression and thinks the yellow is inserious. The yellow thinks the blue is boring. Both assessments are unfair. Both are completely predictable once you know what's happening. And here's how other colors get labeled when nobody understands the mismatch. Reds come across as cold, aggressive, or dismissive when they're just being efficient. Yellows come across as scattered, flaky, or inserious when they're just thinking out loud. Greens come across as indecisive, boring, or disengaged when they're actually processing carefully and keeping the peace. Blues come across as nitpicky, slow, or impossible to please when they're holding a standard that they genuinely believe matters. None of those labels are accurate, but they stick, and the cost goes way beyond awkward conversations. It's the promotion you didn't get because your boss is a red and you kept leading with context instead of conclusions. It's the relationship that slowly went cold because one person needed more space than the other knew how to give. It's the deal that fell through because your pitch hit every detail a blue would care about and none of the energy a yellow needed to feel, and you never quite figured out why. So what do you actually do about it? That's where this gets useful.
Here's something the framework doesn't make obvious at first. Every color has a best version and a worst version, and the gap between them is stress. When things are calm and predictable, people operate close to their strengths. When pressure hits, they slide into an exaggerated, uglier version of themselves. And if you don't know what triggered it, you'll take it personally every single time. So before you try to speak someone's language, you need to know what shuts them down. Reds under stress become impatient in a way that borders on aggressive. They start looking for someone to blame, they get short with people, and they lose what little tolerance they had for anything slow, vague, or indecisive. What sets this off isn't conflict. Reds actually handle direct conflict fine. What breaks them is inefficiency. A meeting that could have been an email, a decision that's been circling for 3 weeks with no resolution, a teammate who keeps saying, "I'll look into it," without actually doing anything. The moment a red feels like the people around them just can't get it together, the patience evaporates and the frustration comes out loud. Yellows under stress get louder and more chaotic, which is saying something given where they start. They become frantic, scattered, and increasingly attention-seeking because the thing that stresses a yellow out most is being ignored, left out of a decision, talked over in a meeting, criticized in front of the group. A yellow who feels excluded doesn't go quiet, they escalate. They get more animated, more performative, sometimes more erratic because their nervous system is wired to solve social disconnection by turning the energy up, not down. If you've ever watched someone become increasingly over the top in a room where nobody's paying attention to them, you've probably watched a stressed yellow trying to find their footing. Greens under stress do the opposite of everything you'd expect. They go completely silent, not in a sulking way, more like a turtle pulling into its shell. Sudden change is the main trigger, a plan that shifts without warning, a conflict that appears out of nowhere, being put on the spot to make a decision they weren't prepared for. Greens handle pressure by retreating, by buying time, by waiting for the storm to pass. The problem is that this looks like indifference or stubbornness from the outside, so the people around them push harder, which makes the green retreat further. It's a loop, and knowing it's happening is the only way to break it. Blues under stress become hypercritical and nearly impossible to satisfy. Every flaw gets noticed, every gap gets flagged, and any suggestion to just move forward or figure it out as we go sounds like an invitation to disaster. What triggers this is careless mistakes and last-minute changes, both of which feel like a complete disregard for the standards they hold themselves to. They're not trying to make things difficult, they're genuinely distressed when the process falls apart, and criticism is how that distress tends to come out. Once you understand what tips each color into its worst version, the behavior stops feeling personal. It becomes a signal, and a signal you actually know how to read. So now you've got the map, you know the 4 colors, you know which one you default to, and you know what pushes each one into its worst version. This last part is where all of that becomes usable, because knowing the framework is one thing, and actually changing how you show up in a conversation is something else entirely. Let's go color by color. With a red, lead with the outcome, not the backstory, not the context, not the 3 things you want them to understand before you get to the actual point. The outcome first, then the recommendation, then the next step. Something like, here's where we are, here's what I think we should do, here's what I need from you. That's it. Reds respect speed and clarity the way other people respect warmth and patience. So if you walk in with that structure, you'll get their attention immediately. What kills you with a red is burying the lead. If they have to wait 4 minutes for the point, they've already mentally checked out and started solving a different problem. With a yellow, your job is to match energy before you manage direction. Open with the big picture, let them get excited, give them room to riff, and then, once they're engaged, gently channel that towards something concrete.
Don't open with a plan. Don't open with a list of constraints. Open with, here's why this is interesting and here's what it could become, and let them run with it for a minute. Then you can guide them toward the actual next step. Yellows don't respond to structure as a starting point. They respond to enthusiasm, and you can absolutely use that. The mistake people make is trying to contain a yellow before they've connected with them. Skip that step and they'll shut down without knowing why. With a green, the whole game is about removing uncertainty. They don't need excitement, they don't need a tight deadline, they don't need you to push. What they need is to feel like the ground is stable, that they know what's coming, that they have time to think, and that you're not going to suddenly change direction on them. So instead of, we need to decide on this by end of day, try, take your time, here's what to expect, I'll follow up Thursday. That phrasing signals safety, and safety is what unlocks a green. Pushing harder when a green goes quiet doesn't speed things up, it sends them further into the shell. Slow down, signal consistency, and they'll come back on their own. With a blue, you earn trust through preparation. Walk in with your data ready. Acknowledge what you don't know instead of glossing over it. Blues notice gaps, and if they catch you bluffing, the credibility you had is gone. The phrase, just trust me, is basically kryptonite for a blue because it asks them to skip the very step their brain won't let them skip. What works instead, here's the data, here's the step-by-step, double-check anything you want. That last part, double-check anything you want, is underrated. It signals that you respect their process instead of resenting it, and for a blue, that shifts the entire dynamic. Now, one thing worth being clear about, none of this is about performing a version of yourself you're not. You're not pretending to be enthusiastic with a yellow if you're naturally a blue, or pretending to be patient with a green when you're wired like a red. You're just choosing which part of yourself to lead with based on who's in front of you. Think of it as being multilingual. You're not changing your identity every time you switch languages. You're just meeting people where they are so they can actually hear what you're saying. And that brings us back to the trap from earlier. Learning the colors can very easily turn into labeling people. She's such a blue, he's such a red, and using that as a way to explain away behavior you don't want to deal with. That's the wrong move. The framework isn't a judgment tool, it's a reach tool. The whole point is to close the gap, not to get more comfortable keeping it.
Once you know someone's color, their behavior stops being something you react to and becomes something you understand. The red who cuts you off isn't dismissing you, they're just running on a different clock. The green who goes quiet isn't shutting you out, they're processing. That shift in how you read people changes almost every interaction you have. So, here's what I want you to try. In your next conversation, pick one person and run the 3 questions. Figure out their color. Then make one small adjustment, just one, to how you talk to them. That's all it takes to start. And if this kind of framework interests you, the next step is learning what to do before the conversation even starts. Robert Cialdini wrote a book called Pre-Suasion, and the core idea is that the moment right before your message lands matters just as much as the message itself. If this video helped, hit subscribe.